Hi there, my name's Dean Davies, and for those of you who are new to listening to me for the first time, my business is called Naturally Powered, and I work in the space as a performance coach with both athletes on the sporting field and also health and wellness. Now, I wanted to just have a discussion or make a comment today about something that arrived in my LinkedIn feed from Deepak Chopra. Now, first of all, it was 2014 originally, so I guess he must be recycling some of his old articles. But the thing that intrigued me the most is what seemed to be really trending at the moment, and that is how to discover and fulfill your life's purpose. Now, for me, life's purpose was clarified by one of my teachers called John Morton, where he said, it's not really about finding or discovering your purpose. It's more about becoming aware or identifying your gifts and knowing where you can use them. Okay, so they can be used perhaps in a workplace or in the family unit or amongst your friends or on the sporting field. You know, the setting is irrelevant. It's where your gifts are going to best be used for the upliftment, self-development, growth, and learning for others. So anyway, that's my understanding. Deepak goes on to ask these questions. Like, why am I here? What is my purpose? And how do I discover and fulfill my deepest mission? His opening paragraph, which I will attach the whole article to this video, he says, these are questions that we all ask at one time or another. Sometimes we discover the answers early on, but we often continue to ask these questions throughout our lives. As we grow and mature, the answer to these questions continue to evolve as well, as we discover ever deeper aspects of ourselves and our potential. Sometimes we go through phases where a clear vision of our Dharma or purpose seems to elude us. Now, just before I go any further, I just want to illustrate this, or pay attention to this idea of Dharma and purpose, because Deepak seems to use these things indisposably. In other words, they mean the same thing. Now, my understanding is that Deepak is tied up closely or holds very closely to him the idea of the Ayurvedic traditional philosophy, and perhaps this is where he gets his idea of, or his definition of Dharma from, and maybe the Ayurvedic philosophy uses Dharma and purpose interchangeably. However, if you choose to look at the internet per se and look for a definition or a meaning, you're going to come up with very different definitions, particularly as it relates to, say, like Buddhism, Sikhism, Hinduism, etc. So have a look at those, and from that information you can make up your own mind. And while we're here, I'll just give you my experience, and that may add to your understanding. So a few years ago, I spent 3 months in an ashram, and part of my role there was to perform certain tasks. Now, that means complete tasks that contributed to the upkeep and running of the ashram, meaning just simple domestic style jobs like washing dishes, doing tours for visitors, let's say cleaning floors, raking leaves, things like that. So everyone that lived there was expected to do something, or there was a list, and it revolved around, so you weren't doing the same thing all the time. Now, so that was from the point of view of completing an action. However, my understanding of Dharma is that not only does it relate to the task itself, but it also relates to how you actually do the task, okay, in terms of what you bring to the task in terms of your internal state or your state of well-being. So are you in resistance or opposition, or are you in flow and have a good attitude towards what you're doing? So, for example, let's say you're being asked to clean the bathrooms, right? Well, you can resist that in a way of thinking perhaps you are too good for that role, so therefore, you might feel angry and frustrated while you're doing the role, or perhaps you see it as something that you can do because that's what your arms and legs are for, right? So, and you know that it's providing a loving service for all those that wish to use them, so that's okay with you, right? So you're not above it. So really what we're talking about here is attitude. And perhaps that's what Dharma means. It's like, what sort of attitude are you going to bring to the task in as a function of service to whatever you're providing service for, be it in your job or in your home life, to your family or your friends. Deepak goes on to talk about, or we might encounter roadblocks, be it whether they internal or external, that seem to prevent us from fully living that purpose once we identify it. Now, me personally, I'm not sure whether external roadblocks actually exist, okay, because all they are, when we recognize them, is a reflection of an internal obstacle or block that exists within us. Okay, now I would, in the arena that I like working in the most, which is sport, lots of sports people or athletes have experienced unexpected setbacks. Okay, now let's say in the surfing space that I've worked mostly in, they have to deal with an ever-changing environment like tide, wind, and other conditions. Now, if they've been paying attention to what's actually been going on in the environment, they're going armed into their event the best way they can. However, sometimes things change. Now, when they experience an obstacle, so to speak, that they weren't ready for, let's say that there's a rapid change in the wind and they weren't ready for that, what is it actually asking them to do? They can, or how are they going to react? They can actually develop a learned helplessness and give up, or they can just go back into focusing on their process in terms of, well, what have they got to do now in terms of the best they can from where they are. Okay, two different attitudes in terms of how they're going to approach it. So this again is an internal situation which has a big impact on how you choose to interpret or respond to your external environment. So that said, I think it's all about changing your internal environment to allow your external environment to be much smoother. All right, so Deepak goes on to say, these obstacles, however, don't have to be permanent for us because of who we truly are, infinite potential. That's how he describes us. We can learn to move through all that hinders us from living our Dharma. In fact, such obstacles can actually be used as opportunities to further our expansion. All right, so we're going to look at Deepak's explanation here further, and we're going to do that with what he describes as 6 tools for discovering and fulfilling your life's purpose. So here we are at tool number 1. He says, establish a connection with the core intelligence of your being. All the intelligence of the universe resides within you. Open a dialogue with that intelligence and ask it to reveal your life's purpose. Be open to the many avenues through which those answers can come, internally, externally, through friends, acquaintances, circumstances, and synchronicities. Now, as I read this, I'm just reminded of a funny thing, a joke I had with my girlfriend at one point in time when we were talking about this, and I said, does this inner voice of yours sort of respond like Morgan Freeman, like in that movie God, where he just comes along out of nowhere and says, okay, Gosha, what I'd like you to see you do today is go down to the local car yard and buy a Prius. And we just used to laugh about that because, no, it wasn't that straightforward. It sort of comes along just like Deepak's talking about here, it can be internally, externally, through friends, acquaintances, circumstances, synchronicities. It's just about becoming aware. Okay, so it's becoming aware allows you to establish this connection with your core intelligence. Now, the core intelligence, what actually is that? Okay, it's just a word or a name or a label that would perhaps define many things, and it doesn't really matter what you call it. You could call it an essence or a spark of God. You could call it God. You could call it cosmic consciousness. All right, it depends on where you're coming from. I'm sure it's all the same thing. Now, Jesus, from the Bible, was renowned for saying, I am the light, I am the truth, I am the way. Now, he wasn't referring to himself physically speaking. He's referring to the I am, in other words, the core intelligence of his being, that inner part of him, which is I am. Okay, so whenever he referred to, or Jesus referred to this idea of I am, he was referring to this this inner part of him which was greater than him. So, he also said something along the lines of, the he who is in me is greater than the he that is in the world. Again, referring to this part, which he said is the I am part of him, which is greater than who he is as he exists in the world. In other words, something bigger than his physical body. Now, Deepak's asking us here to open a dialogue with that. Now, the ways that Deepak's mentioned here are very helpful. That can happen in many ways. And one of the ways I like to use is, I use two ways. One is paying attention to my dreams. Two is just sitting in quiet meditation in terms of just listening. Now, not listening to my external environment, but simply listening to my inner environment. So everyone knows about this third eye, okay, in the middle of our head, but not many people talk about the third ear, which sort of is located just here, back in the middle of the head. Now, we can tune in to the sound, okay? Now, that sound could actually be the space in which Deepak is suggesting that we go to here. Or he could actually be suggesting that we get in contact with our heart. All right, there could be a number of things here, but there are many avenues. Other ways, become very aware or more in tune or mindful of how you interact with your environment. In other words, how am I responding or reacting to my day-to-day situations? Now, the only way you can do that is basically become more aware of your reactions, be them positive or negative, because, and let's face it, positive or negative is not good or bad, okay? It's just a way we like to use to describe something in terms of our reaction, okay? Now, it could be just telling us something, and what it is that it's telling us, that's where we'll actually get the answers, where we look inside, okay? So there's many ways, these are just a few of them. So moving on to number 2, Deepak says, use meditation and introspection. Practice meditation to create greater inner clarity and awareness. Use introspection to discover yourself more fully. Use both as ways to dialogue with your core being. Okay, so let's talk about meditation. What is meditation? I hear a lot of people these days say, well, meditation is sitting down and doing nothing. Well, have you ever tried that? Because it's not possible to sit and do nothing, because, maybe body starts fidgeting, or you start, thinking about what has to be done. In other words, we have this monkey mind, etc. and so forth. All right. So in that case, meditation could be the form of, let's train ourselves to view our thoughts from a neutral perspective. In other words, like watching clouds in the sky. Now, if we become really good at that, maybe we don't analyze the thoughts as they come past, where perhaps that's what we did in the first place, okay? When we analyze, we tend to mull over something, and then our emotions get involved, and we're now not in a meditation state, we're now in a thinking state, okay? So, perhaps that works for you, perhaps it doesn't. I just wanted to give you a little bit more clarity on that. Some say that the mind is a shitty master but a great slave. Okay, so we have to direct it. All right, we have to direct it in some way, shape, or form. And sometimes meditation can take the form of maybe intently gazing at a candle, or intently gazing at the surface of a glass of water while we hold it. Or it could be repeating a mantra, either aloud or internally, or it could be actually watching our breath. Any of those things actually focuses the mind, so it gives the mind actually direction and no room for all that other chitter-chatter that can likely move us out of that space. And the more we practice it, the better we are at it, and then that gives us that space to experience that communication or that dialogue with our core being, or our soul, let's say, or the I am, or the he that's greater than me, whatever you choose it to be. Probably with greater ease. Okay. He also talks about introspection. Okay, so introspection means looking within. Okay, so where do you look? That is the question. Okay, or is this a matter of just contemplating something? Okay, or introspection in relation to something external to you. Okay, in other words, introspection in relation to how you responded to the criticism you received from your boss today. Okay, how did I actually receive that? All right. Did I actually react negatively inside? Did I experience some negative self-talk? Did I hear talk that said, he doesn't know what he's talking about, how dare he speak to me that way? Or did I experience internal dialogue that said, okay, I accept what you're saying. I won't believe it as truth until I actually reflect on it and see whether it has any value for me in terms of, is there something I can learn from this? Okay, two totally different ways of looking at it, all right? Perhaps that's what he's talking about when he says introspection. Anyway, you can use both of them as ways to dialogue with your, I like to call it inner self instead of core being. Let's move on to number 3. Okay, so we've got affirm your unlimited potential. Give yourself daily reminders that your true nature is pure, unlimited potential. Now, I won't read the rest, but you can read that in your own time. Affirmations. Okay, so since I've been involved in this industry, since I was 19, so we're talking a good 30 years ago, I've been really interested in affirmations, particularly Louise Hay was one of the early pioneers, and I just love her work. However, what I've actually learned is that affirmations are pretty much like learning a new skill. Okay, much like learning a skill in sport or a new task at work, it takes time and practice, okay? So if we're trying to learn a new skill such as a golf swing, many hours, in fact, I forget the name of the author, but let's just say 10,000 hours are required to perfect your skills in a particular sport. Now, do you think we're going to spend 10,000 hours repeating the same affirmation? Or if we do repeat the same affirmation every day, how long do you think it would take to have an effect? Yeah, a long time, right? Okay, so they do work, but there needs to be a lot of work invested in that affirmation. Now, the other thing I find with affirmations in terms of something that's a little bit problematic is that these are an intellectual tool, okay? As an example, right? Perhaps an affirmation says, I love and accept myself on all levels, always and always. Okay, now, that sounds great in theory, but what does it actually mean if it's not accompanied with a feeling? Okay, so if we're going to actually manifest something in our life, now those of you who saw The Secret back in the day got really hyped up about this. This is what they were sort of presenting, but they weren't talking about this part, right? So if you're going to manifest something, you need a thought, a feeling, and an action. Okay, so like in sport, we use dynamic visualization practices in addition to training. Okay, so we not only think about how we want to carry out our performance, but we feel what it's like to perform it and achieve it, and we associate, perhaps a level of satisfaction with that achievement of that performance together with an action. And we do all those three things, we get manifestation, right? Now, this is where the affirmation runs into trouble. Unless we actually associate a feeling with it, it has no power. It's just an intellectual comment. So if we can actually create something, now the body doesn't know the body doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's not real. Okay, so what I mean by that is that it's and I think from memory, someone said to me, fake it till you make it. Okay, so that's essentially what we're doing here, is we're going to bring a feeling from another part of our life in and associate it with this affirmation. So maybe along the lines of, if you're a parent and you can remember clearly what it felt like to hold your baby in your arms for the first time, okay, the feeling that you associate with that, you can bring that feeling forward and associate it with something like an affirmation that I mentioned before. Now, what sort of action are you going to use to actually consolidate that? Okay. Now, in the performance space, we use this thing like a pause lock or a physical lock, where we actually use our physical body to lock it in. Now, what I do is I teach people to use this action here, right? So once they've generated the feeling inside based on however they brought that forward, and they use the affirmation, then they give themselves permission to lock that in by using this physical lock or pause lock. Okay. Now, if they do that enough times, then there's perhaps a greater chance that this affirmation will be more effective more quickly than it would be otherwise if you just repeated it verbatim over and over and over and over. Anyway, that's just one little key that I use to make affirmations more powerful, so perhaps you can use that too. All right, so let's move on to the next tool. Number 4, it says use relationships as messengers from your core intelligence. Okay, so let's say that this I am, or this core intelligence, has got such great wisdom that it perhaps sets up our environment in such a way that our relationships with the people around us show us or give us messages. So he says here, pay attention to what others are saying to you regarding your talents, skills, and gifts, especially if you hear similar things from multiple people. Relationships are one of the primary ways our core intelligence communicates with us. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't have too many people telling me about what an amazing person I am on a regular basis, right? Or telling me how skillful I am, or what my gifts are on a regular basis. Okay, so, perhaps it might happen randomly every now and then. Perhaps you're getting that. Maybe I'm the odd one out. I don't know. But anyway, the point is that the word relationships also means not only how you relate to others, but how you relate to yourself. Okay, so one can be a reflector of the other. Okay, so if let's say you're in the office and you're receiving some like monthly feedback from your supervisor, and some of it could be deemed criticism, although we'll call it constructive. Okay, so how are you relating to the information, and how are you relating to this person? Okay, and is the way that you're relating to this information skewed based on how you relate to the person? Okay, so there's lots of questions to ask here. Now, if we relate further, we might take that into how do we feel when we receive this information, or what do we think of this information, and what do we think of this person? All these things are going to colour our interpretation of what the messages is what the message is that is coming forward, that will determine, how we use that information. All right. So it's not quite as straightforward as perhaps what Deepak is trying to articulate here, but nonetheless, it's worthwhile keeping in mind that there are messages coming at us from our environment all the time, mostly in the way that how we're responding to them. Okay. Are we responding to them in a place of neutrality, loving, joy, and upliftment? Or are we responding to them in a place of resistance, challenge, or negativity? That's the question. All right, moving on. Right, and lastly here at number 6, we have set your intentions and pay attention to synchronicities. Deepak says, use intentions to either create greater clarity about your purpose or to help achieve your purpose, and pay close attention to the various synchronicities that play out in life. Interpret these as responses to your intentions and then act on them accordingly. Okay, so a lot of people that I come across actually get a little bit confused by this idea of what is an intention. Okay, so most people are very familiar with goals, and the thing about a goal is that it's usually quantitative. Okay, so perhaps in the business arena it might be sell so many product, or complete so many service appointments, or raise so much money, or complete a particular time in training for sport, or kick so many goals, all that sort of thing, right? And usually that will be, over a period of time, where there'll be an action plan set up, and providing you complete the small steps on the way to that goal, you most likely will achieve it if it's a realistic goal. Now, the difference is an intention is much more a qualitative process. Okay, in other words, it's more of a plan. It's like, how do I want to execute? How do I want to execute? What sort of person do I want to be? Or how do I want to see myself in the world, in terms of what I would like to achieve, right? So if we're going to use an example such as weight loss, let's say it might be to lose 10 kilograms over 3 months, right? So, first of all, you decide, okay, how am I going to do this? You get a gym membership, you get a personal trainer, you might get a dietitian, nutritionist, etc. They set you up with a plan. You maintain activity along those action steps along the way. In other words, you complete all the mini action steps, and you arrive at 3 months. And if you've done everything according to plan, according to the experts, most likely you've lost the 10 kilos, right? And perhaps you'll be like over the moon or just satisfied or whatever. Now, an intention is a little bit different. Okay, so we're not going to take away the goal, but the goal will have a different meaning, and you'll have a different response to completion of your goal if you set up an intention. Okay, so an intention for this might be, I'm choosing to pursue a more healthier lifestyle because I know it's better for my health and well-being overall. Okay, so my intention is to eat better, exercise more, for the purposes of improving my health and well-being. It can be as simple as that. Okay, so it's very holistic in its nature, but it also doesn't have an endpoint. So when you think about your intention, you might say, okay, well, what sort of person would I be if I was going to be that? Okay, so it's completely different from the goal, as you can see. Now, so this becomes more about the journey rather than the endpoint. So when you get to the actual endpoint and you achieve the goal, because your intention is intact and you've been consolidating it through all the completion of your action steps, it's easy for you to maintain, right? And you may not need any further goal to move ahead with, okay? Because simply the purpose of just maintaining a healthy living lifestyle is enough to keep you to maintain your diet and your exercise. However, if you didn't have the intention and you're just solely focused on some sort of illusion that you're going to achieve a level of worth or enoughness just by losing 10 kilos, then you may experience that level of worthiness or enoughness for, say, a short period of time or even a millisecond. Okay, this happens in sport, when you win a medal or you achieve a personal best. And then shortly after you have depression, okay, or you start depressing, and then you've got to have another goal. So it's like a dog chasing its tail. It's never ending, goal after goal after goal. Where if you're trying to achieve your qualitative goal through a quantitative intention, you're much more likely to succeed anyway, but without the extreme up or the potential downfall following the achievement of the goal. Now, so hopefully that's give you some idea about an intention. And then it says, pay attention to synchronicities. Okay, so synchronicities, what are they? Now let's get back to our weight loss goal or our intention. Synchronicities in relation to our high level intention might be, so you've got a membership at the gym now, and each time you go there, a parking space is available for you really nearby. Okay, and that may only be on a rainy day, because on a sunny day or a fine day, let's say your core intelligence says, you know what, it'd be much better for you if you actually park a long way away so you can actually do some exercise on the way to the gym. So see what I mean? Depends on which way you look at it. Or, maybe you go to use this machine in the gym, and every time you try to use it in the past, there's always someone on it. But because your intention now is of such a degree, it's quite qualitative and has a lot of value for you, it just so happens that each time you use that machine now, it's available just when you want it. All right. Or maybe even you're in the shops and you're walking through the checkout lane, and the checkout operator that you just happen to know because you see them there all the time says, "Hey, you look fantastic," or "You look really well." And maybe it's only been a week into your new routine, but it's actually your intention coming through, because you might be expressing it through your eyes or some hidden body language, and the person receiving it gets it, right? So it's got nothing to do with the 10 kilos, it's just coming through. Now, if we're going to relate that to an intention around our purpose, I've just written something down here. It might be, my intention is to allow myself to become more aware, receptive and open to opportunities that come forward to best share my gifts with others. Okay, so see how that doesn't have an endpoint? It's more about becoming more open to identifying your gifts and knowing how to use them. Okay, so that might be your intention, and that becomes a journey of process throughout the rest of your life, and slowly but surely things come forward and synchronicities come up. Okay, in other words, circumstances or situations that seem to be in line with ways that you can actually express your gifts, so people around you experience some sort of upliftment, self-development, growth or learning. Okay, or you contribute to a business or something along those lines. Anyway, hopefully that all sinks in, and this brings us to the end. And look, if you've got any questions, I'd surely appreciate it if you contact me. There is an opportunity on my website to contact me for a 30-minute free introductory session. So by all means, I'd love to hear from you. In the meantime, here's to greater health and well-being, and setting intentions to explore your gifts and purpose for life. See you soon.